What drove your desire to, just be a high performer?
It wasn't always like that, I'm not gonna lie to you. So like growing up, I was a shy kid. I was rather lazy, but I was like very active. I always wanted to, do stuff and just get out of the house, but I didn't necessarily have that structure. I don't have someone hold me accountable. So it really wasn't until high school, actually, about my senior year or junior year, had one of my coaches pull me aside. He's like, listen, man, you got all the talent in the world. He's like, you just need to work a little harder. Just know you got it within yourself. And he told me, he's like, I was just raw, uncooked chicken. Once you season it up a little bit, once you season that thing up a little bit, man, then you'll see how polished you become. And I took that in, I saw the results, I put in the weight room, and then, I became getting accolades. I started, hearing from colleges, going to visit schools, and then I applied it to my education too. Like seeing the success on the field warranted me to try harder in the classroom and join more clubs and just be more involved and having better balance of time management skills. And then having two foreign parents, come from Haiti, not have any means of education, strive for the best for their kids, and then move me from place to place to place. That's a driving force. They put me in a private school in the city, right? And their expectation for me was much different than my siblings, right? So looking back on it now, I didn't know then that they put me in that private school for a reason, but now I'm like, okay, they saw something within me. So I saw them just consistently work their butts off, have no babysitter, my dad bring me to work. So like seeing that, making no complaints and just showing up, being consistent, that's a driving force, because having two parents present, being a minority was just huge for me. I happened to see that every day. They never made no excuses. Bills were paid, food was on the table. And that showed me, if they can do it, I can do it. They're not from this country. I was born here, so everything's accessible for me. So how they got here is night and day, right? But they're here now and they've made things happen. And they forged a path for me as a young man to, forge my own path, and hopefully I make them proud along the way.
Welcome to the Performance Pulse podcast. I'm your host, Antone Wilson, high performance coach and founder of HyperSpeed Health Technologies. We leverage data and technology to amplify your performance physically, mentally, and financially. If you're driven to maintain a winning mindset in every endeavor, then you're in the right place. Stay tuned.
How's everyone doing today? We're here for episode 1 of the Performance Pulse podcast. If you're just tuning in, we have a guest today, a good friend of mine, Bryan Narcisse. I'm so happy to have you here, man.
Thank you for having me, man. Very, very, very cool to be here. Appreciate it.
No doubt, man. Wonderful times that we have going on right now. Now, this is our second episode. However, the first one was me taking the time to introduce this podcast, talking about what we do at HyperSpeed Health Technologies and introducing the concept of functional operating capacity. Now, the general premise of this podcast is to interview people from all different walks of life about high performance. Now, to set the stage for what those interviews are going to be like, I wanted to start off having a guest on here that would actually be interviewing me. However, I wanted to make sure that they lead a similar lifestyle. We have a history and rapport together, and we can have a really strong dialogue, really talking about how we live our life. And I don't know if there's anyone else at this period of my life that I feel like could bring the best out of me. And so today, Bryan is going to be interviewing me. But before we dive in, just wanted to talk a little bit about how we got acquainted and the history of our friendship. So what is it from your perspective?
I mean, we grew up same class, so same class 2010, and we're around the Metro West area, so Medway and Natick, not too far along the line. So I check along, get the daily paper, the Metro West Daily News. I'd read up on the Natick kids. I see names like Antone and Rob Jackson, a few other guys, Joe Crynson and Kevin Duffy along the way. And time went on. I followed these guys, and I saw the success that your teams had as our senior season went. And then postseason came along, and I happened to catch a game when you guys were playing Franklin High. And I happened to see a game where I think Rob Jackson might have played pretty well, and then you were there, and then you won that game in dramatic fashion against Franklin, had everybody out there, the whole town was out there. Never seen a playoff game like that in my life. Then from that point on, you had the Super Bowl, you guys came up short.
Were you at that game?
No, I watched it on TV though.
Okay.
I watched it on TV, so I was like very intent because I was like, guys beat Franklin, which is 2 towns over from Medway, so I was pretty excited.
That Franklin team was phenomenal.
You had Matt Carini, Nick Colson, you had some guys on there, so that class of 2010 was special. So from that point, time went on, You know, I was going through my senior recruitment, you know, going through visit colleges, you were going through your thing, you know, going through camps and everything. Then by the time college came along, we were making our decision. I ended up at Dean College, and you ended up at Dean College. Happened to be a coincidence, you know. We weren't necessarily too familiar with each other. You know, we had seen each other a few times passing by, done some partner stretches, brief conversation.
I always tell that story to mutual friends about one of our first encounters. And as a small running back slot receiver, you want to obviously do partner stretches with someone that plays your position, just because they're going to be close to your size and they're going to know how to stretch you out. This guy was massive. He has these huge legs. Just like lifting him up was like a workout in and of itself. Not to mention, beginning of the summertime, and this guy's just sweating on me profusely. Now I remember he was incredibly well spoken and, you know, knew everything about Natick. We didn't really know much about Medway at that time. To be honest with you, I didn't even know that there were black folks in Medway. However, I know Rob had some family out there, so I knew there were some. I knew that you had actually known his family.
Yeah.
I definitely, you know, had a little bit of wherewithal, like, okay, like Medway, Bryan, like I knew of you a little bit. And we immediately just had a strong relationship. Liked how you carried yourself. The defensive line room was incredibly talkative, incredibly competitive, had a lot of strong relationships there.
100%.
But it wasn't until you left Dean to where our relationship really took off.
100%.
And so what was that next phase like for you after that?
So after I left Dean, you know, my goal, obviously, most guys that wanted to go JUCO, they aspire to go to a 4-year school, get a scholarship, and, you know, whatever happens from there happens, you know, shoot for the stars. But, you know, I was thinking financially, you know, I realized how expensive going to a school like that was. Granted, it was very accredited from an athletic standpoint, but I realized, you know, long term, I wanted to have less student loans. I wanted to go to a state school and just put less of a burden on my parents, you know? So I thought going to a state school would better suit me and I would just get my bang for my buck. I'm still getting my degree. So along the lines, I transferred and still touched base with some guys.
Did you do 1 semester or 2 semesters?
I did 2 semesters,
Okay.
1 full year. I went to the spring ball with you guys, did the weight room lifts and all that fun stuff. So got that experience, you know, got my financial aid. I realized it wasn't enough. So I went to Worcester State, but something happened to come along that I wasn't gonna go to Worcester State. I was gonna go to Bridgewater State originally. Then something fumbled along the lines of my housing and, you know, checks and just all this miscommunication, which ended up me, you know, going to Worcester State. I talked to some guys from Dean still, you being included and a few others, asking where I was, you know, and then I saw you guys' success just dominating through the JUCO ranks, you know, and then I was doing my thing at Worcester State, stayed in contact, and I was like, okay, it's looking likely that potentially I could get some guys to come with me, you know. So your season ended, you guys had great success, you won a bowl game. We went to a bowl game, we weren't as fortunate as you guys, but, you know, we stayed in touch along the way. And then I just threw it in your head. I was like, hey, take a visit at Worcester State, right? Take a visit at Worcester State. But it wasn't until that spring semester of our sophomore years where I came and took a visit, and it was actually our first time that we actually formally hung out. You know, just chopped it up, just you and I, just talking about whatever. And from that point, we just built more of a rapport and just stayed in contact. And then I think from that point, we started training together too, and started adding in, you know, picking each other's brains and just hitting the field and just doing different things to, you know, benefit and compete with each other.
Absolutely, man. I remember us connecting before I went to Salisbury, actually. I remember we had been in talks, you know, all throughout that season. You knew where I was at, and you were going into the season. Now, the name of this episode is called Trust, Teammates, and Lifelong Brotherhood. And whether it be some of the guys at Dean, which, you know, both of us are very close with till this day, you know, where we went on, you know, at the next phase in our lives. Like, you know, you introduced me to Pat. Shout out Pat, you know, Stefan, who happened to be one of my best friends. You know, we always feel like we would have met regardless at some point in our lives with, you know, how our journeys are. But, you know, that's what's so powerful about sports, man. I can't say it enough. Is like, you know, there was, you know, first generation Americans, kind of had a similar upbringing, I guess you could say. Grew up in a town where we were the minorities. Football was the driving force in our life, but also fascinated by the culture, art, music, and not just football, but other sports. Really grew up on a lot of the same things. And so those relationships that you develop, it was one random night where Bryan was just visiting at Dean and connect with some old friends, and I happened to be staying in, had a workout the next day, and decided, yeah, Bryan, let's just kick it, man, let's just chop it up. And we walked around the school, talked about life, what we wanted to do, long-term, financially, really everything, man. and that's where like the seed was planted. And so it was really difficult for me. I remember, transferring from Salisbury. I was going through a lot personally. That was the first time I really had to look myself in the mirror from an identity standpoint and step outside of like the football world a little bit. So when I transferred to Worcester State, that's where I decided, and I mentioned this before, that I was going to be a regular person. I was like going to develop as a human, begin getting involved in the university, developing relationships with friends who didn't play sports. You had done such a great job with all those things. And so from the second I went there, I think I blossomed as a person. And I don't think any of those things would have happened if it weren't for you being there. You are the reason why I went there.
I'm glad you came aboard, man, for real.
And we were able to, there's so many people that we recruited to go to that school. And we had really built that thing up where we were almost like player coaches, if you will. And, going to a smaller school allowed us to have that influence. And before we transition though, man, one thing I did want to say, obviously the work that you're doing now as a recreational officer, but your work ethic was absolutely second to none, and your production at Worcester State. Now, a lot of young athletes always think, I gotta go D1, I gotta get that scholarship. Now, it's not good to go to a school, transfer a bunch of times, never even get on the field, make a name for yourself. And I feel like you really embody, Graham as well, going to a smaller school, being a 4-year starter, building a legacy for yourself, being an All-American, and just being dominant. That's what it's all about. And I would have much rather had a legacy like that. I think more kids should aspire to do that. Create memories that, will last a lifetime.
I agree. It's all about the experience, man. I feel like more kids get wrapped up in the name and just, what comes with being a Division I athlete, all the perks. You get all these free benefits, Now with social media, it's on social media, you wear the jersey. And I feel nowadays kids lose the love of the game, and, if you're coached up at a smaller school and you just go to GS, be a regular person and just, realize the bigger picture, it'll just be a much easier time, less stress off your back. And that's really what I aspired for when I went to Worcester State. I already had the mindset when I went there that I was going to be good. For it to pan out the way it did was just due to my work ethic, my mindset, the people that I was around that I exposed myself to, and I wanted to, emulate certain things from, strong-minded people that I was around. And it showed, and I was happy to have, strong-minded people that I surrounded myself with, to work out with, aspire to be like, and just, rub off with, converse with consistently. And I'm glad that you put me on here to have this conversation with you and talk about these things.
Absolutely, man. I feel like that was a good transition. You haven't never been on a podcast.
Never in my life.
Just, go to the dialogue. I feel good. For one, man, why I wanted you to interview me. That's one thing I definitely want to cover. Now, we trained together. Brian's a defensive lineman. I'm 5'0" nothing. I was 165-pound running back, slot receiver, and Bryan was lifting small villages for recreation. And we went hard. I needed to train with the D lineman to bring out that intensity. And, we were pushing close to the same amount of weight, which was always, the way we trained, even at a Division III school with no resources, was like every day could have been the combine day. Our numbers were always up to par. And I remember we had talked about, we were in a savage mindset.
Oh, bro. It was savage. We were trying to go to DeFranco's
We wanted to go to DeFranco's
in Jersey. Drop $1,000
Brian Cushing. I was like, that's one.
That's one right there. You can't stop me.
No, absolutely love that, man. But I think you're probably one person I spent the most time with training, just like, outside of a team setting, throughout all of college. And I think we shared so many of those years together. So when I saw you at Mark's house a couple months back, and we had a phenomenal conversation. I hadn't seen you in a couple years. We picked up right where we left off. The one thing that came to mind was like, man, I'd love to share one of these conversations with the world, because they're always so incredibly powerful and inspiring, enlightening, etc. It just drives me. And then we connected again at Kofi's wedding. Got a shout outs on here. Love all the boys again. It's that brotherhood, man. And that's where I was just like, Bryan facilitates the best out of me. We always have the best conversations. And if there's anyone I can, trust to ask me difficult questions, who really understands the layers of me way better than most, and will also challenge me, hold me accountable, tell me when I'm being a little bitch, but also be able to sympathize with me and be a ear for me, which I appreciate. So that's why I wanted to bring you on. Remember, what's your take on this format? Because you're interviewing me on my podcast.
Again, this is my first time doing a podcast, so just to even like have this exposure and try something like this is just great, man. Just to test something out and just hopefully give people, see this, more insight on how this platform operates, and I'm glad I can be a part of it. Pick your brain, you pick my brain, and we're two like-minded people, that want the best out of each other and the best for, basically just everyone around us that we surround ourselves with. So it's just going to be a great experience. And I think, I've seen your work ethic and I've seen how hard you've just been going at this platform persistently, day in, day out, always talking about the ins and outs. And now finally, having this platform where you can put it on all networks, for people to see on all different, social medias. It's just enlightening to see, man. And you're persistent about it. And like every time I talk to you about it, like it gives me insight. Like my little brother talks with me about how he watches your podcast and he listens to it because I just told you, my brother just had a kid recently, and my brother is learning growth mindset and, is more stagnant. And now that he's, listening to podcasts, having a child, learning about trade, and just trying to get more insight, I just feel like it's more insightful for people our age, or any age from that matter. If you feel like you're in a lull, or if you feel like, you want to get some insight, or just, step out the realm of what you usually listen to, I feel like this would be a good platform to do it.
I appreciate that, man. That means a lot. Shout out Jerison, love you, man. We developed a relationship, going to your house, developed a relationship with your little brother, myself. And this podcast is called Performance Pulse, man. And so it's really about a way of life, expecting to dominate, being honest with you. It's about being elite, man, everything that you do. And I discussed, some of your football success earlier, but really, man, habits. It's all about habits. Waking up early, working out, being consistent, carrying yourself like a professional. I think that a lot of the people that we went to gym with went on to really do some great things in other aspects of life, which I think all great teams tend to have, really strong characters. But for you, man, what drove your desire to just be a high performer?
It wasn't always like that, I'm not gonna lie to you. So like growing up, I was a shy kid. I was rather lazy, but I was like very active. I always wanted to do stuff and just get out of the house, but I didn't necessarily have that structure. I don't have someone hold me accountable. So it really wasn't until high school, actually, about my senior year and junior year, had one of my coaches pull me aside. He's like, listen, man, you got all the talent in the world. He's like, you just need to work a little harder. Just know you got it within yourself. And he told me, he's like, I was just raw, uncooked chicken. Once you season it up a little bit, once you season that thing up a little bit, man, then you'll see how polished you become. And I took that in, I saw the results, I put it in the weight room, and then, I began getting accolades. I started, hearing from colleges, going to visit schools, and then I applied it to my education too. Like seeing the success on the field warranted me to try harder in the classroom and join more clubs and just be more involved and having better balance of time management skills. And then having two foreign parents, come from Haiti, not have any means of education, strive for the best for their kids, and then move me from place to place to place. That's a driving force. They put me in a private school in the city, right? And their expectation for me was much different than my siblings, right? So looking back on it now, I didn't know then that they put me in that private school for a reason, but now I'm like, okay, they saw something within me. So I saw them just consistently work their butts off, have no babysitter, my dad bring me to work. So like seeing that, making no complaints and just showing up, being consistent, that's a driving force. Because having two parents present, being a minority was just huge for me. I happened to see that every day. They never made no excuses. Bills were paid, food was on the table. And that showed me, if they can do it, I can do it. They're not from this country. I was born here, so everything's accessible for me. So how they got here is night and day, right? But they're here now and they've made things happen. And they forged a path for me as a young man to, forge my own path, and hopefully I make them proud along the way.
Hey man, I think you've overexceeded expectations on all cylinders, and not only that, set the stage of creating a standard for your brother and your sister. And so I admire that to the utmost degree. Three things stood out to me as you brought that up as well. The first was, one of your coaches bringing up, the potential that they saw in you, and that being like the turning point. The second being your parents moving you around a lot, the impact that has on you. One, recognizing your parents working hard. There's a lot of transitioning that they're going through, trying to maintain as immigrants and trying to develop professionally to create and provide. And then the third being the responsibility that you carry as the oldest. I'm always trying to draw parallels into like what drive performance, what's your why? And it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, as if those are three core components. Obviously, there's so many layers to you, but those are three driving forces that really set the stage for
100%
everything you became, from 14. 'Cause that's when you could really start writing your path.
Agreed.
Around 14 when you get to high school.
And I really feel like along that high school stage, I wasn't necessarily more in tune with myself in terms of like the confidence standpoint, realizing my potential. But I feel like once I got to junior college and then going to Worcester State and expanding to my adult life is when I really got to go through those life experiences and just realizing my real self, and being honest with myself and realizing I got a whole lot more to go, but I can reach these things and I should hold myself to a higher standard, because my parents set the precedent, and people that I surround myself should want the most for themselves as I do for myself and them.
1,000%, man. Well, yeah, that's quarter one, man. 1 quarter down.
That's one quarter down.
That's one.
That's one. That's one quarter.
It would be after the first beer. Always you and RJ just yelling it across the room. That's one.
That's one, guys. That's one.
Oh man. No, I love it. I think we have memories. It's like
Night
the vault. We'll throw it in the vault. There's so many things in the archives.
So many things in the archives.
All right, man. Coming out Q2.
Now we're going to flip it up.
Yeah.
We're going to flip the script now today, okay? Antone likes to ask the pressing questions. This time we're going to flip it up. As you mentioned before, I'm about to ask him the pressing questions, and I cannot wait to pick his brain, like we always do. So, here's what's going to happen. So, Antone, I'm going to ask you these series of questions. I want you to answer them to the best of your abilities. All right, my friend?
Yes, sir.
All right. Why you're so unconventional? Since I've met you, right, you're probably one of the most unconventional people I met, but I love it just because it means you got a story. It means to me that you got some character. You've been through some tough times, but you've come standing on your 2 feet, standing before me as someone that's dealt with resistance, overcame, planned it out, sought a way. So I want to know, right, have you ever waking up at odd times, moving schools, have you ever thought to yourself, why am I doing this? Why did I put myself in this predicament? Like, what drove you to have such an unconventional path? Because you've literally traveled all around.
For sure. I think anyone who knows me probably wants an answer to that.
Yeah.
And I would say that it's all fairly organic, for one, because I'm an only child. My mom is an immigrant. She was born in the Cape Verde Islands. And then my dad was a drill sergeant and a police officer, which is, a traditional career path. But my dad definitely was a role model from a standpoint of seeing a male figure who wore a uniform. And this will all add up. But he was a male figure that wore a uniform, was very intelligent. However, he also cop, military. He played semi-pro football, worked in a fitness club, member of different organizations, different groups. And so when I was around with him, I was always switching settings, and I watched him just always stay busy and continue learning.
Okay.
And I think he moved around so much that I sort of replicated that. And he always wanted to send me to camps when I was a kid so that I can get used to being away, developing friends, not getting homesick. And then we used to drive from Boston to Florida. And I'd get used to road tripping. I had a lot of material goods, if you will, when I was a kid. You had a lot of sneakers. I was a sneakerhead and jerseys.
Yep.
However, I always was just intellectually curious. I guess it's just the nature of my spirit. And I always wonder, well, what's the meaning of life?
Yep.
And I'd always ask my mom, why am I here? I'm out as a baby. I don't know
awesome.
why.
No, it's awesome. You're asking your mom now.
And I always used to say, if there were to be a fire in my house, what would I grab and why? Okay. So as I got older, I think it was after my first ACL when I recognized that I have no identity outside of being a football player. And I was like, the only thing I'll be able to carry with me is my knowledge. And it wasn't until I read the autobiography of Malcolm X and I recognized the first stage of his life, living with his aunt, being a hustler in Boston, going to New York City, navigating through all these different groups of people. And it was if I can live really unconventionally and, maintain my mobility. And I would say that I actually was fairly normal up until 24, 25. It wasn't until I got out of a serious relationship in my mid 20s in which I got really odd. I was always a little different, but it wasn't until like I started selling all my stuff,
Yep.
like going on like weird diets.
You were going through some fads.
I was going through some weird stuff. It was like
stuff.
a bohemian lifestyle. Like I was eating like X amount of food groups, meditation, went on retreats. It was just very explorative through just like different studies of like religions, ways of life. And I would say that it just gave me perspective, and I was so curious for knowledge, and I wanted mobility because mobility would buy me the ability to get perspective. And if I had more perspective, I'd be able to solve problems.
100%.
And so taking a diverse skill set, which again I got from my dad from watching him do so many things, and obviously like the way my mom raised me, she always talked to me like I was an adult. I was fortunate of like the fact that the adults around me when I was a kid spoke to me like I was a grown man. Like there was no difference of like oh, like you're a 5-year-old kid, stay in your lane. And so from a very young age, I just wouldn't take any shit. I was always like daring and like sought for more and like spoke to adults like they were equals. And, you know, just going into like my psychology, I think I grew up really, really fast in my mind. So by the time I'm like 22, 24, I'm like 40. And then I think the experience that I gathered from like 26 to 31 made me like, I'm like 55, 60 years old. And so I just have I can die any type of day attitude. Shout out Kanye, I love that. And I got it.
I love that line.
I got memento mori on me across my collarbone, which means remember death. And I think that, you know, ongoing thought that one day I'm going to die. And so when I die, it's like your life is like a book. Will my book be something worth reading, or will it be another dusty one on the shelf? And so it's like every day I'm writing pages, telling a story, and I believe it's something that people would like to read.
I like that answer. I like that answer to that. That's really good. You know, keep adding every day another page to that story, as you always are. Now, my next question for you now. You had mentioned earlier you mentioned your mother being coming from island of Cape Verde. Now, how do you feel that both of us, coming from being first-generation Americans, coming from foreign backgrounds, how do you feel that it helped you, how you perceive society growing up, and how it, you know, impacted your upbringing along with your mindset, and how it, you know, affects your approach to day-to-day life?
Deep question, man. For one, I'm such a fraudulent Cape Verdean, and that's because I can't speak the language. I'm so Americanized. My mom's whole family speaks Creole. It's like a Portuguese dialect. I think that's the word dialect. Yeah. And I'm the only one that can't speak it in the family, so I'm missing
You can
out
understand
on
it though, right?
No,
Okay.
not even a little bit. Not even a little bit. My mom said she tried to teach me. Well, she gave a poor effort. She's gonna hear this, just get angry, whatever. It's just the truth. I didn't learn the language, but
okay.
beyond that, I feel like just football raised me. And so the good, the bad, you know, the ugly was that like I didn't really look for any external stuff was outside like football. And so, you know, now and looking at it from the football realm, the sport, it's driven by diversity. Again, like
100%.
we see like all the players playing, the majority is 85% black. And then like my dad's very, very proud of black culture, as is my grandmother, and everyone in my mom's family speaks a different language. My dad always let me know from a very young age that there was a very small margin for error as a minority, especially in a community like Natick, and especially when people know my family. So there was a high standard. So it was just like, whatever I do, I'm gonna have to just work a little harder. And that's fine. And I had a strong work ethic, but I didn't let that define me. It wasn't like it was going to be a crutch. And that's why I hate even discussing race relations, because I feel like that could be a barrier that you put in your mind. So I grew up incredibly
open-minded,
proud, and understanding my history. I had a strong sense of identity, especially because everyone on both sides of my family were working class people that had status in society. So I think I have a very different perspective as a minority, but the fact of the matter is that there were times where I felt like it was a little difficult. I'd say especially climbing the coaching ladder when coaching was my profession and refusing to conform. And so this put pressure on me to be myself and more so like look at like there might be some places where you're not accepted and you're going to be forced to maybe change character. More often than not, though, adapt.
Yeah, you have to adapt.
Be adaptable, but sometimes you have to be someone that's not yourself, and I knew that I couldn't do that. Fast forward, it wasn't until breaking away from coaching to where I feel like there were racial dynamics that were really weighing on me to where I actually to this day, I stopped looking at race relations entirely and started operating, this is from my perspective of seeing a lot of shit, to be honest with you, studying a lot of religions to where like I don't even align with like, this isn't like my physical body, like I don't have like an identity. I'm a human being. I talk to every single person as a human being. I don't care about age, I don't care what you look like, gender, etc. Like, your blood's red, okay? And you know, it's one thing people saying that. I think a lot of people are full of shit when they say that. Like the level of depth that I'm able to connect with people and the strength of a lot of my relationships. And we'll talk about some of my relationships down the road here, but like everyone I'm really, really close with comes from such different backgrounds and lifestyles, upbringings. And so like I really embody that. And so I think the upbringing of like, this is who you are, this is where you're from, the roots, I couldn't get away from it, which is great. It's a testament to the village that raised me. You know, my mom, my dad, and the other family members, the coaches, the people around me that were so prideful. But it was my exploration through understanding that like those things are just division mechanisms. And I'm not gonna allow that to determine my, how I handle my relationships with people. So I would say that that's how I've handled it, and that's how it's definitely defined me. It's just the pursuit of understanding human behavior a lot better.
I like that. I like that answer to that question, because not a lot of people have that perspective, and you know, being exposed to all different facets and just to have that mindset is beautiful. And I feel like a lot more people should have that. You know, a lot of people have this, I feel, I don't know, preconceived notion, and like we mentioned before, like before they even say anything, having a conversation, let the internal factors outweigh the external factors, which makes them a little reluctant to even, you know, have these conversations and, you know, have prejudgment. And we're all human, we all judge. So again, how has this perspective or approach, you know, from growing up the way you did, growing up, you know, in a diverse household, how has it impact you as a coach, a mentor, and a leader?
Deep. First things first, man, as an individual, because I'm a human being, first things first, man. And I can't be the best person I can be for the world unless I'm the best version of myself. And have a way of controlling my emotions and being able to stand upright and produce and be all those things in society every single day. I established that I was just gonna unapologetically be myself. It wasn't until I went through, you know, various trials and tribulations until I got to that point. But more so than anything else is like, be undeniable. Be undeniable. Align with truth. Speak it. Speak with conviction. And just demand nothing but high performance from yourself. And I think that I've sort of like bought this right through hard work to you know, hold people accountable, to, you know, desire that role of having that responsibility, forcing change, and you do that through educating yourself and, you know, trying to, you know, craft yourself, and like your life's like a blank canvas. How can I make myself as exceptional as possible? And what you recognize is that as you get stronger, both physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, you gain an ability to articulate yourself, and the cream of the crop always rises to the top, and the truth won't discriminate. And so if I can continue to develop as an individual and put my personal development first and foremost, I'll be able to have an impact on society. And if I truly am to the level I work to or aspire to get to, then I will just be undeniable. And so none of those things that you mentioned even make a difference. And they're not going to be a thing unless in my mind I decide to make them a thing. And so as far as I'm concerned, they don't even exist.
I like that. That's a great answer. Great answer to that. Great answer to that. Now we're gonna hop on to the next topic, right? Now we're talking about training, right? Day-to-day life. Now, you and I, very familiar with training. We've trained together many of times, you know. And now, this next question, I want to know. We trained together many years. Now, I want to know, beyond the training, right? How does it fuel you, and why do you train, and what's it for?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, you train hard too. You train hard still as well. For one, I recognize that like physical activity drives my life. I'm at my best when I'm exercising. It clears my mind. It's like an outlet. It's an escape. And working out's one thing, and my body's worn down from all the rehabilitation process and playing football from a young age. But now it's like that competitive drive, you versus you. Not just that, but developing a skill and learning. I'm really fascinated by that process. So for one, the doctors told me that I would be arthritic and I might need a knee replacement. So I don't follow, what they say, if you will. And so for one, all right, I'm gonna prove this doctor wrong. Two, I love to, okay, this was my PR in the 1 mile. How can I beat that? Every time I'm running, I'm training for a purpose. But now it's basketball. I love playing basketball, and it's a medium for me because I can connect with different people, different groups of kids. I can connect with people of all age groups. I can be a coach on the floor. So what drives me is to, one, at 31 years old, how can I make myself good enough at basketball to still be able to play and compete and connect with more people, but also, develop a role. 'Cause I'm 5'0". Can I shoot well enough? Can I be a good defender and make myself of value so I can go anywhere in America, play basketball with the locals, and not be a liability? And so I love sports, and for me, football was that outlet, and so now it's basketball, but it's really different as a working professional that just plays for recreational activity. And so all of my training now fuels my game in basketball. And let me just put it to you like this. It's like making a sales call, okay? Or just like you see a girl that you want. Well, you gotta take a chance. You gotta shoot the shot,
Shooter's
right?
gonna shoot.
So shooter's gonna shoot 100%. And so the only way I'm gonna get comfortable to ultimately be able to hit, NBA range threes with the man in your face off the dribble, given, very, very specific hypothetical conditions, is through repetition. So I've just tried to expand my game. I've taken a lot of shots to get so good to the point where there's not a shot that I won't take, and I can actually measure the progress. So it's like a metaphor for life. Just prepping to take shots and getting so confident that there's not a shot that I'm not willing to take.
You never know. You never know the chance you don't take if you don't shoot your shot, right?
100%.
Right? You never know. Great answer to that question.
I'd like to say I think I'm a sniper now as well.
You're a sniper now.
I think I'm a sniper now. I can play a little bit. I've worked quite a way, so I really appreciate the process, man.
You work towards that. I like that. Last question I got for you here, right? Now, you've been everywhere. You coached so many people, right? Along the way, different friends, different hats that you got, different relationships that you carry, right? From the players to the mentors, what type of people are you drawn to? And can you also define brotherhood to me? Along with your core values.
Okay. I'm an only child. I think that drives me quite a bit. I think that you're searching for meaning. You're looking for relationships, you're looking for community as an only child. I recognize that I was different from a young age. I always could see when someone, like, whether they were like first generation American or like the oldest or like a middle child, or like they establish like they want to go pro, they're dedicated to something. They're dedicated to like an art form, or they're attacking each day. They're unapologetic, they're confrontational. All these different things are outside of the norm. These are called like the misfits. Okay, think about Phil Jackson, all the personalities that he manages. I've been on this pursuit, I guess, even from a young age. I think about all my friendships. There's like some sort of moment when it was like, this person's gonna be my friend. Go ask Mark how we met and how he said something to me and I punched him in the stomach. And then like he punched me back. This is like third grade, and right after that we're best friends. Still to this day.
To this day. Shout out Parker.
Yeah, absolutely. That sort of dynamic, like we're people who are aggressive, daring. I want to be a guiding force in those people's lives, regardless even if they're my peer. I love that energy. I love those people. They fuel me, but also letting them know that they're not alone, and having been an only child and feeling fairly isolated to begin with, being that stabilizing force for other people. And so just drawn to people that are living with purpose and that come from some sort of unique background, which is going to fuel them to have a unique perspective with life. And you and I share a handful of those things that I just mentioned, but that's sort of like the commonality in like those misfits.
Yes.
I have that tattoo on me. I can recognize them from a mile away, and it's like sometimes they need that friend. They need that support, and letting them know that they're not alone. And so it's even better now when I work with younger kids. I'm a PE teacher part-time, and seeing those kids that are trying to figure it out and allowing them to be themselves, and hearing that from an adult, because I know that that's what I needed. So it was like my personal exploration in figuring out the patterns of all my relationships, and now using what I've learned from all of my peers, because it's like, Bryan, I can't tell you how many times when I was at St. Thomas Aquinas, I met kids that had a similar upbringing to you, and me understanding you helped me coach other people. And so like my friends who are the misfits allow me to help other misfits down the road.
That's deep. That's
Not
deep.
actually
yeah,
misfits, man, but like
you had that
I've
first
seen this
experience,
personality before. I've seen like RJ's personality type. Shout out RJ again. We both know him. RJ's an artist. He's brilliant. He's a creative, but not everyone might understand him. I've seen that in an athlete, and his teammates or other coaches might understand how to coach him, understand how to talk to him. It's not through having friends that are like that, and being accepting and understanding them. Can I now help other people? And seeking to be around people who are different that can even give me that perspective, which I think is what my life journey's been about. I yearn for that brotherhood because I don't have it internally, and so my whole life has been about trying to create it.
I love that.
Thanks, sir.
You hit up on all those questions that I just asked
Well,
you. That was awesome.
Appreciate it, man. And so, yeah, man, really, as we conclude this thing, I think from athletics, high performance, trying to set an example, try to leave a legacy in the world, those are the things that drive us, man. I talk about education and leadership quite a bit. Now, you're obviously a recreational officer now, but sport has a huge impact on your life, and you're also a mentor to so many different people. So we talk about education and leadership. Can you talk a little bit about like what those things mean to you and like some closing words?
To me, talking about education and leadership, again, like I mentioned with my parents before, my parents didn't have a formal education, but they educated on me on life lessons through what they've gone through, from me firsthand seeing how they went about their day-to-day life, how to make something out of nothing, coming from a different country. Nowadays, to wanting to just be better, sometimes I get so stubborn in my ways, like, I can do it this way, I got this. So persistent in the pursuit of being better as opposed to not learning. I used to feel like that be my detriment. I used to not want to learn, not used to take advice or constructive criticism. I used to, be sensitive to a friend or somebody I viewed as a comrade trying to give me some helpful input, and I would view that as me attacking them. Now, was that a fixed mindset? It might have been, because again, I didn't necessarily have the guidance or the exposure to that, but as time went on and the people I surrounded myself with that had the similar attributes and goals that I wanted, and I felt like that a long time, and having experienced things really shaped my mind and my core values. And I feel like being around guys like you, Joe Princeton, being guys like Rob, just seeing what they've come from and like how they carry themselves, and the success they've had in sports, the success they've had outside of college, into their adult lives, and how I'm still able to talk to guys like this and build a rapport and call them friends and see where they are and consistently looking for growth. That's huge for me, having that, again, because constantly moving, being in different realms. I don't necessarily view the race thing, but like if you're my friend, you're my friend. I don't view white or black, I myself am in a relationship with a beautiful lady who doesn't look like me. That doesn't mean anything, because I learned leadership skills from her. It can be through learning about finances.
And she's a phenomenal individual
yes.
as well.
And I can learn leadership through her, from finances, having uncomfortable conversations, if I'm not feeling well, how to open up and expand more, and just talking about my feelings, all these things from the people that I've come across. I just try to take all these things from, and I feel like you gain leadership, you gain knowledge in all different facets of life. It doesn't just have to be school. Sure, it's nice. You got a 3.6 GPA, you went to an accredited school, but what else do you get out of going to that school? Did you get any core values? Did you have any social skills? How do you handle resistance? Because everyone's going to meet resistance in life. But how do you deal with that resistance, right? And when you deal with that resistance, good or bad, right? What's the adaptability, right? And like working in a prison, being a recreation officer, I learned to adapt with prisoners. You know, everyone comes from a different background, everyone's got a different case, different temperament, so I have to learn how to de-escalate sometimes, how to adapt to their learning, you know? So whether it be whether I'm working a wedding, whether I'm doing a basketball tournament or a Scrabble board tournament, for God's sakes, or a flag football tournament, you know? I'm adapting in different realms, different facets of life. It's all about adapting in life because everything is gonna be different. What you plan sometimes may not go how you want it. So it's all about just adapting and adjusting. But again, the values that you get from leadership, from the people that you surround yourself with, if they instill that in you, I feel like you can carry that a long way. Educating yourself on various things, and I feel like as human beings, we're educating ourselves in all different facets. I go to Muay Thai, and I educate myself every time I go. You know, I used to box for 8 or 9 years, and people don't necessarily understand the premise of boxing. I educate myself to be comfortable in chaos, but also how to learn how to hit and not get hit, because you're gonna get hit with some shit in life, but you gotta learn how to dodge that shit. Floyd Mayweather, great at that. So again, I just feel all these things take precedent, and you have to apply them to your day-to-day life, and they're very applicable.
Beyond inspiring, man, beyond inspiring. I'm so happy that we've been able to capture this conversation for the audience. We have these conversations amongst ourselves, but I feel like you just embody that athlete who way overachieved, got the most out of yourself, developed as a professional, wore that responsibility of being the oldest in your household, constantly set a high standard for yourself, and understood the power of your voice to also impact others, taking that sports mentality and that work ethic and allowing that to fuel you to not only diversify your skill set, but constantly find new opportunities and not being afraid to get uncomfortable. Like, that is blueprint. That's a blueprint that you're writing, man. And it's almost like this stuff does not get recognized enough. And it's like, yeah, forget like the guy that goes on to become an agent or a lawyer, like those things, like, oh, former athlete. It's like, no, like, common folks who were phenomenal athletes that go on to be difference makers in their domain and in their community. And the fact that there's going to be more people that need to grow into that role than there are going to be former pro athletes that retire searching for the next phase or might work in pro sports or some sort of glamorous thing. It's like the working class people, those are the people that shape the people that walk into those positions, that develop leaders. You develop communities. Mm-hmm. You're a stabilizing force. That is invaluable, and we do not celebrate that enough. And so, I'm just fortunate enough to be able to speak on this podcast and connect with people like yourself. I have so many friends that have done phenomenal things and achieved so much professional success post-athletics and things that are totally unrelated.
And all these things didn't come without self-doubt. A lot of self-doubt comes into making these life-changing decisions. And I myself had to get out of that fixed mindset as a young kid from, having self-doubt and just overcoming these things. And again, through exposure and having surrounded myself with the right people, I felt those lessons that I took into me being a 31-year-old man right now, I feel as though it's very applicable, and I just felt I'm getting better each time and growing each time. And I never want to remain stagnant, because if you do that and rest on your laurels, you're never going to grow, because anything that you do in life where you want to expand never comes from being comfortable.
100%, man. The second you start stagnating, it can get scary. I find that is like, that's the danger zone, stagnation, the pits of mediocrity. Mm-hmm. That's what I like to define them as. But you hit the nail right on the head right there, man. Looking for personal development, growth in every single thing that you do. And that's what I'm all about, is getting 1% better each day. It's like I'm writing pages and I'm pushing myself to basically at the end of the night say, did I get better or worse? Did I get the job done? It's like each day I have the opportunity to win. However, it's like I'm gonna lose some days, and that's okay. But on average about 30 days in a month, if I could just lose 3 to 4 days in a month, at the end of the annual cycle here, if I have 4 to 5 losses a month, that's gonna equate to like what, 60 to 70 some losses a
In
year,
that ballpark,
and
yeah.
what, like 290 to 300 wins.
Mhm.
And now watch that compound over a decade, and let's see what your life becomes. Let's see what the byproduct of those wins become. That's my philosophy. That's what we look to embody here at Performance Pulse. Bryan embodies that in his life. If you like what you guys see, make sure that you subscribe on our YouTube channel, /HyperSpeed. Make sure you subscribe on Spotify. And I'm also a pretty avid writer. If you would like to hear more from me, check me out on Medium at Coach Wilson. Another episode in the books. We are 2 down. Performance Pulse, Coach Wilson, checking out. Win the day, y'all.